Friends, Canadians, countrymen. We're back, baby. What's happening, everybody? Justin, Bridgewater's finest on YouTube, Blockbuster_guy on Twitter, normally fueled by nerd teas, but I literally drank myself out of my own supply, so a new order needs to be done and will be done in short order. And welcome to my weekly CFL football pick show for the 2023 CFL season. We are back. I believe this is season 5. And I've been doing it long enough that I've lost count. I'm pretty sure it's season 5. I think season 4 was last year. Oh boy, has a lot happened in the CFL over the offseason. It feels like every player seems like they've moved either to a totally different conference or at least a different team. There's been a lot of player movement, a lot of shifting around, and honestly, I think the balance of power in this league has shifted somewhat. You're going to see some familiar faces, I'm sure, when it's all said and done, but I feel like there's been a bit of, there's been a bit of a power shift in the CFL, and I can't wait to get into talking about that with you in this episode, which encompasses not only my season preview, but also encompasses our picks for week 1. And what is that I spy on my shoulders? Look, I'm one of the biggest CFL creators on this platform. It's still weird to say that, but I guess it's true. Got to start looking the part, and there was no better way to do that than by honoring our defending Grey Cup champions, the Toronto Argonauts. Be interesting to see what they do for a follow-up, for a sequel to that performance, but look, gotta respect the team that won it all last year. I got a couple of CFL shirts that will be rotating throughout the season, and that was courtesy of my good friend Brittany from Christmas, so I really genuinely appreciate that, because gotta help me looking good for these videos. So, before we know where we're going, obviously, we gotta know where we stand. And in terms of where we stand, look, there's a lot of conversation that needs to happen, but let's take a look at how I would have power ranked the teams in this league at the end of last season. Obviously, it's going to be fairly standard. I think most people would have their power rankings basically the same coming out of last year. Obviously, you got to put the Argos at the top. They won the Grey Cup. They're the defending champs. We're going to put them at number 1. They beat the Winnipeg Blue Bombers in order to do that. We're going to put Winnipeg at number 2. Interesting conversation between Calgary and BC. Personally, I would have ranked them Calgary 3, BC 4, simply because the story of the Lions season last year was during Nathan Rourke and post Nathan Rourke. They were two different teams, still obviously very good. And of course, Nathan Rourke did eventually come back for the playoffs, but it's the story of two different teams. I give Calgary a slight edge there. I'd rank Montreal at number 5, Hamilton at number 6, Saskatchewan at number 7, Ottawa number 8, and Edmonton at number 9. Those are the ways that I would have power ranked the teams coming out of the end of the 2022 season. Obviously, this offseason, like basically every offseason, we've had some notable retirements as well as notable players that are currently not active on a roster. It doesn't mean that we won't see them on a roster this year, and it'll actually be one of the interesting storylines for the early few weeks of the season to see which of these players wind up landing on a roster. We're looking at wide receiver Lamar Durant, who had a really interesting offseason where he signed with Ottawa and then retired. Linebacker Chris Aki from Montreal. Brandon Banks is not currently on a roster in the CFL, which is super, super interesting. Nathan Rourke obviously plying his trade south of the border in the NFL with the Jacksonville Jaguars. McLeod Bethel Thompson leaving the CFL, going to another league to ply his trade. Don Jackson is not currently on a CFL roster. Brian Burnham retiring from the BC Lions. Also from BC, Delvin Breaux and Sean Lemon. Sean Lemon being a really interesting story where he was a camp cut to make room for a player that BC brought in, I believe, with the Dane Evans deal, and then cut him. So then now it's going to be really interesting, or not cut him, but traded him back. So it'll be really interesting to see what happens here with Sean Lemon. Darnell Sankey, and Charleston Hughes. Charleston Hughes is not on a CFL roster right now. That's crazy to me. And then William Powell, running back for the Ottawa REDBLACKS. So there's a lot of firepower that's not currently sitting on a CFL roster, and it'll be real interesting to see if after the first few weeks of the season, if these players don't start like signing one-year deals with teams that have hot starts or really have a chance to maybe make a deep run in the playoffs. Be interesting to keep an eye on some of these players. And look, if I'm inaccurate about any of these, please let me know, because obviously a lot has happened this offseason. So, in power ranking these teams overall, I think it's also important to say, look at the offenses and look at the defenses and power rank these teams in those prisms. So, offensive power rankings as well as defensive power rankings. This is how they would have sat for me coming out of the 2022 season. This is going to be kind of wild, but I would actually have power ranked the Calgary Stampeders as the number one offense in the CFL. That is a combination of points scored as well as their ability to move the football. Winnipeg, I think, scored right around as much as they did. I think BC moved the ball a little bit better than they did, but in terms of the combination of both of those things, I would power rank Calgary number one coming out of last year. I'd put Winnipeg number 2. I'd put BC number 3. I'm going to power rank the Argos number 4. I think they were a very opportunistic team last year and put points on the board in very, very key situations and did it fairly consistently throughout the season, tended to move the ball very well as well. I'd put Montreal 5, Hamilton 6, Ottawa, Saskatchewan, Edmonton. That's how I would have power ranked the teams strictly from an offensive perspective coming out of last year. Looking on the defensive side, impossible not to power rank the Winnipeg Blue Bombers number 1 on the defensive side, so obviously that's where we're going to go. I had the Lions number 2. I actually put the Hamilton Ticats number 3. I think Hamilton did really good things on defense last year, by and large. Hamilton's biggest problem, and the reason that they had to fight so hard to sneak into the playoffs at the end, it wasn't specifically the offense or specifically the defense. It was how they played in the second half of football games. That is their biggest thing coming into this season. You got to figure out how to play in the second half. I personally think it's an Orlando Steinauer thing, and if it rears its ugly head early this season, I was kind of calling for a coaching change last season, so don't be shocked, especially with Hamilton hosting the Grey Cup this year. Don't be shocked if you see a coaching change early in the year. I put Calgary number 4 in the defensive power rankings. I put Montreal number 5. Toronto, once again, very opportunistic defense, but I'm only going to power rank them number 6. And then Saskatchewan, Ottawa, and Edmonton. Very definitively, those 3 teams that missed the playoffs are clearly the 3 weakest teams in the league coming out of last year. But does that hold true heading into 2023? We had an exceptionally active free agency period, a lot of players in new places. How do things look now? I chose to look at this through a prism of which 3 teams have improved the most offensively and defensively, and which 3 teams have improved the least or, gotten worse offensively and defensively. So take this ride with me, and then at the end of this, I'm going to give you my power rankings heading into the 2023 season. In terms of the 3 teams in the CFL that I believe have improved their rosters the most offensively, number 3, I'm going to look at the Edmonton Elks. Now, obviously, this is a team that struggled a lot last season, but they brought in Geno Lewis. They brought in Steven Dunbar. That's a great 1-2 punch at wide receiver. And then they also brought in Kyron Moore. That's a great 1-2-3. That gives them 3 incredible receiving options for Taylor Cornelius as he develops as a full-time starting quarterback. I think Edmonton's offense has a lot more potency than it did last season. And I understand they had Kenny Lawler and they had Darrell Walker, but they didn't. The second that they traded Walter Fletcher, and this is no disrespect to Kevin Brown, when they traded Walter Fletcher, I was like, okay, clearly they know that the potency of this offense is not where it needs to be. And I don't think I can say the same this year. They have arguably the most explosive receiver in the CFL. Steven Dunbar is a great 1A, 1B. Kyron Moore, I think, is one of the best young receivers in this league. I really like the potential of the Elks offense this year. Number 2, most improved, I'm going to go with the Montreal Alouettes, and you're going to say that that's crazy with the fact that they no longer have Geno Lewis. They brought in Caleb Evans, who is an absolute weapon at quarterback. They brought in Cody Fajardo to be their new starting quarterback, and I genuinely think Cody Fajardo is a good starting quarterback in this league. It just wasn't going to happen in Saskatchewan. Like that train had sailed, to turn a phrase. It was not going to work for him there. I think he's going to get a fresh start in Montreal with a better offensive line. I think you're going to see a totally different Cody Fajardo this year. And Greg Ellingson being able to now step in as a true number 1 there in Montreal in a tandem with Reggie White. They got one of the Phil Potts. They've got a really good receiving core there. They've got great runners. I think this Montreal offense is set to do even better things this year than it did last. And the team that I think has improved the most offensively this year is the Hamilton Tiger Cats heading into 2023. They brought in Duke Williams, who's an absolute monster. They brought in Richie Sindani. They brought in James Butler, one of the best dual threat running backs in the CFL. And then, of course, the trade to bring in Bo Levi Mitchell from Calgary to be the new starting quarterback. What does he have left in the tank? What does he have left in his arm? We shall see. But on paper, I think the Hamilton Ticats are the team that has improved the most offensively from last year. And then if you take a look at the defenses, I think the number 3 most improved defense, the Saskatchewan Roughriders. They brought in a lot of depth pieces on defense. They didn't have any big splash signings, but the fact that they brought in like Micah Johnson, I think is probably their best free agent acquisition defensively. And I think this defense is going to take a step forward. It's not their biggest area of concern. Obviously, that's on the offensive line. And they have added pieces on the offensive line. It'll be a better O-line for the Riders this year, without question in my mind. But they brought in Micah Johnson, really good depth pieces. I think the Riders, the number 3 most improved defense from last year. Number 2, I'm going to go with the Ottawa REDBLACKS. Their biggest acquisition, obviously, Jovan Santos Knox, coming over from, I believe, Hamilton. He's going to make a big difference on that defense for the REDBLACKS. And they also brought in Gary Johnson Jr., who is a very, very solid piece in the secondary. I think Ottawa's defense is going to be better. I think they needed to do more, but in terms of the teams that improved defensively this offseason, I think Ottawa is second only to the Hamilton Tiger Cats. Like, genuinely on both sides of the ball, I think the Ticats have improved the most in the offseason. Kwaku Boateng, obviously the biggest acquisition for the Hamilton Ticats, along with Jagarid Davis. Jagarid Davis, a monster in the pass rush. He's going to make a huge difference. They also brought in Thurman, I believe, in the secondary. Plus. They brought in depth. They brought in big, game-changing talent on the defensive side of the ball and the offensive side of the ball. The Ticats know they're hosting the Grey Cup. They want to be playing in that game. The Ticats are going for broke. Now let's take a peek at the other side of that coin. The teams that I feel improved the least, or got the worst, I guess, through the offseason with free agency and trades and what have you. Number 3, we're going to look at probably the Saskatchewan Roughriders. I think this is going to be a very interesting offensive turnover for the Riders. Look, Shaq Evans isn't there anymore. Cody Fajardo's not there anymore. Kyron Moore is not there anymore. Now, they did bring in replacements for these players, but if the O-line isn't fundamentally fixed, which I'm not sure it is yet, I think they've improved it. They brought in an Eastern All-Star. They brought in a former 3rd overall pick, I believe, on the O-line. So they're bringing those O-line pieces in. But if it's not fully fixed yet, I think it's going to be another season of offensive struggles for Saskatchewan. And I think just replacing the outgoing players rather than like really improving, I don't see a ton of difference there. So I'm going to say number 3 for them. Number 2 is Winnipeg. They didn't really bring in anybody of significance on the offensive side. They had Greg Ellingson leave. Now, they brought in Kenny Lawler, but I believe Kenny Lawler is suspended by the team or something like that. If I'm wrong in saying that, please let me know, but I think I remember reading something like that. So until Kenny Lawler's actually on the field, I got to give Winnipeg the second least improved on offense. And number 1 is Calgary, because they didn't bring anybody in. They brought in nobody on the offensive side in free agency. They didn't lose huge. They did lose Richie Sindani, who I believe can be a really complementary piece in a receiving core. But the fact that you didn't sign anybody on the offensive side, they're the team that got the worst offensively because they didn't really bring in anybody. And on the defensive side, in terms of the teams that improved the least in this offseason, number 3, it's going to be the Toronto Argos. The biggest piece, obviously, that they lost was Ja'Garett Davis in the pass rush going up the QEW up to Hamilton. They're going to be number 3. Montreal is going to be number 2. Micah Awe no longer in town. Thomas Costigan no longer in town. Darius Pickett no longer in town. They lost Wakefield as well. They lost key pieces on their starting defense and depth as well. So I got to give Montreal the second least improved. And the least improved team on defense, the Calgary Stampeders, man. They lost big in free agency. And it wasn't just capable starters. It was a ton of depth. Like, this Calgary Stampeders team, I think, is going to look fundamentally different this year, certainly on the defensive side of the football. I don't have the faith in the Stampeders defensively coming into this season that I did in 2022. Maybe they prove me wrong. Maybe that's the bulletin board material that they need. But I don't view this as the same football team that we last saw on the field in 2022. I think this is a fundamentally different team. I think the biggest question mark might be how much does Jake Maier improve over last year, this being his first full season as the undisputed starting quarterback in Calgary. But especially on the defensive side, I'm going to have to see it before I believe it. So with all of that said, here are my power rankings offensively and defensively heading into the 2023 season before I give you my overall power rankings for 2023. So on the offensive side, I'm going to put the BC Lions right up there at number 1. I think their receiving core is still deadly. I think they can still run the football. I think their offensive line is good. I think the quarterbacks, both of them, being Vernon Adams as well as Dane Evans, either one of them, no matter who's starting, it looks like it's going to be Vernon Adams, which I think it should be. Both of them have chips on their shoulders. Both of them have something to prove. I think this Lions offense is going to surprise, especially in the early going in 2023. We're going to put the Hamilton Ticats now up at number 2 with all of their additions. I'm going to put the Bombers at number 3. Still, obviously, a very potent. Look, as long as Zach Collaros is their quarterback, that's going to be a potent offense. They've got Dalton Schoen, who's one of the best now, like sophomore, best young receivers in the CFL. They have a very complimentary receiving core. They're going to be just fine. I'm going to put the Montreal Alouettes at number 4 and put the Calgary Stampeders right behind them at number 5. Again, offensively, I think I have higher hopes for them than on the defensive side. Going to put the Argos at number 6, the Ottawa REDBLACKS at number 7, the Edmonton Elks at number 8, and the Saskatchewan Roughriders I'm going to have pulling up the rear on the offensive power rankings at number 9. On the defensive side of the football, I'm going to say it. I think the Hamilton Tiger Cats come into this season as the number 1 defense in the CFL. I believe theirs is the defense to beat. Winnipeg Blue Bombers, obviously going to be right behind them at number 2. The BC Lions at number 3. I think BC may arguably have the best secondary in the CFL, so we're going to power rank them at number 3. Got the Argos at number 4. Montreal at number 5, even though they did lose heavily on the defensive side, they did also bring some pieces in. I got Calgary at number 6. Ottawa at number 7, Saskatchewan at number 8, and I was very disappointed to see the Edmonton Elks really not add much of anything on the defensive side. They can't really go any lower than what they were last year, but they didn't exactly make strides to heavily improve either. So we're going to put the Edmonton Elks bottom of the barrel defensively at number 9. So in saying all of that, here are my official power rankings heading into the 2023 season overall, and we're going to start from the bottom and go all the way up to the top. Right at the bottom, number 9, I'm going to put the Saskatchewan Roughriders. I think it's going to be a tough season in Saskatchewan. offensively, defensively, I just don't think it's going to be a great year for them. They're definitely heading into a period of transition as far as I'm concerned. Right now, you can get them plus 745 to win the West Division and plus 1,200 to win the Grey Cup. Number 8, the Edmonton Elks. Yes, Edmonton not bottom of the barrel as far as I'm concerned this season, although the bookmakers, the odds makers, they certainly consider that to be the case. They are plus 1,100 to win the West and plus 1,800 to win the Grey Cup. Number 7 is going to be the Ottawa REDBLACKS. I think they just miss out on the playoffs this year, but you can get them if you really believe in them, really believe in Jeremiah Masoli when he does come back. Plus 380 to win the East and plus 1,200 to win the Grey Cup. Now, we get into the top 6, which I believe are the playoff teams heading into the 2023 postseason. Number 6, I'm going to go with the Calgary Stampeders. I think they do still sneak into a playoff spot. They're plus 360 right now to win the West Division, which I just can't see. That. Maybe I'm wrong. Plus 360 to win the West and plus 595 to win the Grey Cup. Like, they have the 5th shortest odds, and they're right behind Toronto to win the Grey Cup. Again, I don't personally see it, but we'll see. Number 5, speaking of the Argos, are the Toronto Argos, currently plus 200 to win the East Division and plus 560 to repeat as Grey Cup champions. I got the Montreal Alouettes power ranked at number 4. There's going to be big questions on the defensive side, but I think with the rest of the East Division, aside from Hamilton, that is also the case. So we're going to go Montreal plus 360 to win the East Division, which is a little tasty, and plus 1,200 to win the Grey Cup. Then you got your top 3, your real hardcore Grey Cup contenders. Number 3, the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. They have the shortest odds to both win the West Division at plus 105 and to win the Grey Cup at plus 190. I don't think they're the top team coming into the 2023 season. I don't even think they're number 2. So we're going to go with the Bombers at number 3, and this is going to be a very fun clip to rub my face in about 15 weeks. Not even, maybe 8. My number 2 power-ranked team is the BC Lions. I think especially on the offensive side, but on both sides of the ball, I do think this BC Lions team is built to compete. I believe they're going to make it at the very least as far as the West Final. I think the West Final is probably shaping up to be BC and Winnipeg. I think especially with the secondary, this Lions secondary is going to be opportunistic, going to make life hell on these passers in the CFL. The Lions currently plus 335 to win the West and plus 530 to win the Grey Cup. So you definitely got some juice if you want to follow along with the Lions. And that means the Hamilton Tiger Cats are my number 1 power-ranked team coming into the 2023 CFL regular season. Currently plus 175 to win the East Division and plus 425 to win Grey Cup 110. They're my number 1 team coming out of the gates. We'll see what happens in the first few weeks of the season. Now, I was asked specifically by one of my longtime viewers, Broken Ankle, if I would take a peek at some certain things and make some predictions for the season as a whole. So we're going to take a look at each team's win totals. These lines are currently set from Sports Interaction, and that's where I got the odds to win divisions and win the Grey Cup in the previous segment. So let's take a peek at the win totals in descending order and see which way I would personally go on them. According to Sports Interaction anyway, Winnipeg, their line is set at 12.5. Hamilton is set at 10.5. Calgary at 9.5. Toronto at 9.5. BC at 9.5. Ottawa is at 7.5. Montreal is at 7.5. Saskatchewan is at 7.5. And the Edmonton Elks are at 6.5. So let's go right from the top. Those top 2 teams, Winnipeg and Hamilton. Winnipeg at 12.5, Hamilton at 10.5. I'm going to go over on both of those. Winnipeg and Hamilton both seem like double-digit winners to me. Winnipeg getting to 13 wins, 13-5. that shouldn't be a problem, especially where I think there's been some power that has shifted from the West into the East this offseason. Getting to 13 wins should not be a problem for Winnipeg, barring, of course, massive injury. Hamilton 10.5. This is a layup over for me. Like, I've got Hamilton winning the East, probably cruising to winning the East, in fact. So 11 wins, no problem. Calgary 9.5. This is going to be, this one a lot of people are not going to like. I'm going under on Calgary for 9.5 wins. I think 9-8 is like a pretty decent spot for them, honestly. And if they finish under 500, I'm not going to be shocked. So 9.5, too rich for my blood. And ditto with the Toronto Argos. Look, there's a ton of inexperience in that quarterback room for the Argos. This is a quarterback-driven league. They're a good team on paper. I don't think they're a great team on paper anymore. I'm going to go under 9.5 wins for the Argos. The Lions 9.5, that should be an over. They're a double-digit win team as far as I'm concerned, certainly coming into the 2023 season. So we're going to go over 9.5 on BC. Ottawa 7.5. I think it's a little aggressive for them, especially with not knowing when Jeremiah Masoli is going to play. Maybe it's this week, but we have absolutely no idea as of right now. So give me the under on 7.5 wins for the Red Blacks there, with the caveat being that's a pretty perfect number depending on how many games Jeremiah Masoli misses. The Alouettes also at 7.5. I'm going to go over on that. I think their offense has some potential. Again, I think you're going to see a new Cody Fajardo this year. They're still one of the best running teams in the CFL with William Stanback as well as Walter Fletcher. Walter Fletcher's an absolute weapon, obviously, in the backfield. Give me over 7.5. Saskatchewan 7.5. Got to go under on it. Don't know what I'm going to get from them offensively. Don't know whether the defense holds up this year, so give me the under on that. And Edmonton is the most unfortunate under of this group. I think Edmonton wins some games this year. I don't think they win 7. 6-11 or 5-12 kind of seems like where I think this team will settle. Again, they're still in a period of transition, but what I will say, the Edmonton Elks will win a home game this season. Write it down, put it in ink, whatever you got to do. The Edmonton Elks will win a home game in 2023. Some other things I was asked to look at, who's going to finish the season with the most passing yards, the most receiving yards, the most rushing yards, and I'm going to toss in my early choice for most outstanding player. So I think Zach Collaros probably winds up leading the league again in passing yards this season. I think he's got the shortest odds on that, depending on where you get your lines from. I really like that Winnipeg receiving core, and still with some question marks about the run game, I guess. I think they'll be throwing the ball more often, and that I think will just lead to Collaros leading the league in passing. But don't sleep on Vernon Adams. That's all I'm going to say right now. Don't sleep on Vernon Adams. And part of the reason that I believe that is I believe Dominique Rhymes will lead the league in receiving this year. His odds are a little longer. Obviously, he's not one of the big names. He's not a Eugene Lewis. He's not a Dalton Schoen. But I really like the ceiling here of Dominique Rhymes with the Brian Burnham retirement. Like, without Brian Burnham, Dominique Rhymes is a dominant receiver in this league. And then when Burnham was playing last year, you saw how the ball had to get distributed a little more evenly. Without him there, and I understand Lucky Whitehead is still there. I understand Keon Hatcher is still there. But this is Dominique Rhymes' season to be a true number one alpha receiver in the CFL. I think he will be that, and I think he'll lead the league in receiving this year. Most rush yards, how do you bet against Kadeem Carey? He's head and shoulders the best running back in the CFL. Dark horse here might be William Stanback, who seems to be feeling really good through the preseason, which is very cool to see. But, I mean, you got to go with Kadeem Carey as far as I'm concerned. And most outstanding player, I think we're going to play it safe and we're going to go Zach Collaros. But once again, dark horse, Vernon Adams at the quarterback position. If he pops off this year, this is basically his now or never year. If he pops off, I could very easily see him winning MOP as well. And without further ado, it is now time for my Week 1 predictions 2023 CFL show. I'm so excited and so happy to be here. Before we get to that, obviously, I am going to take a second to shout out my great friends and sponsors at Nerd Tees. Even though I don't have any Nerd Tees with me right now, I obviously am going to have some in short order, and it's Nerd Tees and Coffee Bean. So if you are not a tea drinker, but a coffee drinker, Nerd Tees has got you covered. They got a bunch of great coffee blends, great estate coffee blends, I should say, and still have dozens and dozens of incredible loose leaf tea blends and accessories, no matter what your taste palette. I can't recommend the blueberry or the watermelon strongly enough. My two favorite teas from Nerd Tees. You're going to want to go to nerdtees.ca, and you're going to want to use my promo code, which is BWFinest. That is going to save you 15% at checkout. You're going to get free shipping in Canada on any order over $100, and why wouldn't you want to spend it on that much deliciousness? You're also going to get a great conversion rate on the US dollar if you're one of my American viewers. Nerdtees.ca, promo code BWFinest, save you 15%, get your free shipping, find yourself something to love, or find someone you love something to love. You can do it on nerdtees.ca. Now, as we head into week one thing that you're going to notice is going to be missing from this episode is CFL Fantasy. So that is going to be a part of the show. It's just not going to be in the week one episode because I'm going to do a separate video on CFL Fantasy. A, I want more people playing CFL Fantasy, and B, stuff has changed. The CFL has gone to like a game zone format where like all of their games are kind of in the same place, and the way that CFL Fantasy works has changed a little bit. So I'm going to do a specific video on how to play CFL Fantasy for 2023, and within that video I'm going to give you my lineup for week one. So keep an eye out for that video, probably coming tomorrow. So now, without further ado, let's get into the week one picks for the CFL in 2023. The matchups are as follows. You got the BC Lions in Calgary taking on the Stampeders. Hamilton is in Winnipeg taking on the Blue Bombers. What a matchup that's going to be. Ottawa is in Montreal taking on the Alouettes, and Saskatchewan is in Edmonton taking on the Elks. Now, obviously, we don't have any stats or anything to pour into this year. All these teams look so different than how they did last year. So here's how we're going to do this. I have one big question for each of these matchups. I'm going to give you those big questions. I love to encourage conversation and debate. Let's get a bunch of that in the comments section below. I'll be in the comments section all week long. Let's chat about the CFL and what we think we're going to see in week one. So with the Lions and the Stampeders, right now the Stampeders are laying 3.5 points as a home favorite. The total here is 46.5. My big question in this matchup is there any quarterback in the CFL that has more pressure on him this season than Jake Maier? Think about the mantle that Jake Maier is taking up. He's taking up the mantle of Bo Levi Mitchell. Like, one of the greatest quarterbacks, I think, in the history of this league. One of the winningest quarterbacks in the history of this league. One could argue the CFL's equivalent of Aaron Rodgers. Like, one of the best that we've ever seen do it. And it's a lot for a young quarterback to take up and to be anointed the guy, so much so that you traded the last guy. It's exactly what the Packers are going through right now with Jordan Love. It's a lot of pressure on Jake Maier. I don't know that there's any quarterback that's facing as much pressure as he is, and it'll be interesting to see how he rises to that occasion. As we've talked about, I'm very high on the BC Lions here, so much so that I smell upset here. I'm going to go with the BC Lions on the road in Calgary to beat the Stampeders on opening week. So obviously, I really like taking the points in this matchup one way or the other. I don't like having to buy that extra hook. So let's grab the BC Lions plus 3.5 points and take them straight up to win in Calgary over the Stampeders. Total in this game set at 46.5 points. I think one of these teams gets to 30 and one of them doesn't. And given that, we're going to go ahead and grab the over in this one. Over 46.5 points in BC Calgary. Let's go Lions 30, Stampeders 20. Now, the Hamilton Tiger Cats traveling to Winnipeg to take on the Blue Bombers. Now, Winnipeg is laying 4.5 points as the home favorite. Total in this game set at 47.5. This is a battle of what I just power ranked the top two defenses in the CFL heading into 2023. As far as I'm concerned, there's nothing low-key about this take. There's nothing hot about this take. I believe this is a preview of Grey Cup 110. This is what I think the Grey Cup matchup is going to be. I think the game's going to be in Hamilton, featuring the Ticats taking on the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. So obviously, I'm exceptionally excited about the fact that this is the Grey Cup preview, and we get it in week 1. So I'm exceptionally excited about that. I think this is going to be a great game. It's going to be one of those games where if you want to get people hooked on the CFL, have them watch this game. You're going to see 2 great offenses, 2 great defenses, and you're going to see them slug it out for 4 quarters. If you want to get people into this league, have them tune into this game. I'm going to go with the Winnipeg Blue Bombers simply because the game is in Winnipeg. If this game was in Hamilton, I'd probably be grabbing the Ticats in this one. This is how close I think this game is going to be. I think Winnipeg pulls it out, but I am going to take the points on the Ticats. Hamilton plus 4.5. That's just too big of a margin as far as I'm concerned between these two teams, at least on paper right now. So give me the plus 4.5 on the Ticats. Total in this game set at 47.5. I'm not sure where this total comes from. Again, I believe this to be the 2 best defenses in the CFL right now. If this game doesn't get to 40, it wouldn't surprise me. So I'm very on the under in this one. Let's go under 47.5 points in Hamilton, Winnipeg. Let's go Bombers. Let's go Bombers 21, Ticats 18. So we're going to go, it's 39 points, doesn't get to 40. Give me the plus 4.5, but I will take Winnipeg to win the game, maybe on a last-second field goal. That'd be very CFL of us. The Ottawa REDBLACKS in Montreal to take on the Alouettes. My big question in this one, look, these are 2 teams that are separated by 3 spots in my personal power rankings that I literally just gave you. I've got Montreal number 4, I've got Ottawa number 7. But make no mistake about it, I think these 2 teams are very evenly matched. I really do. And especially if Jeremiah Masoli does start in week 1, which again, we don't know whether that's going to happen or not. But especially if Masoli starts, I believe Masoli becomes the best quarterback in this game. And if that's the case, you know what? One way or the other, whether it's Masoli or whether it's Nick Arbuckle, we know Nick Arbuckle is very capable in this league. I smell upset here. I'm going to grab the Ottawa REDBLACKS on the road in Montreal to pop the Alouettes in the mouth early this season. I think that'll be good for them, honestly. And Montreal's got, some chemistry stuff to work on here, more so than Ottawa did. Ottawa, I think, had relatively little turnover through the offseason, where Montreal had pretty seismic turnover. Let's take the REDBLACKS here. Let's grab Ottawa in the upset. Ottawa over Montreal. Now, Montreal's favored by 1.5 in this game, so obviously I like Ottawa to win. Give me the plus 1.5 here on the REDBLACKS. Total in the game set at 45.5 points. I'm not enthralled really by either one of these defenses, so I'm going to take the over in this one. Let's go over 45.5 points in Ottawa, Montreal. Let's go REDBLACKS 26, Alouettes 23. And the final game of the week, the Saskatchewan Roughriders in Edmonton to take on the Elks. The Elks are 2.5-point dogs here. Obviously have not won a home game in their last, I think it's 17 attempts. It's been since week 18 of 2019 since they've won a game at home, which there are no fans in this league that suffer more than Elks fans. So they're 2.5-point dogs coming into this one. Total in the game set at 45.5 points. It's time for that stat to change. I'm on the Edmonton Elks in this one, in a big, bad way. I think Edmonton pulls the upset at home. Home dogs against a team that I'm not convinced by at all in the Riders. I think the Riders may wind up being the worst team in the CFL this year, potentially. I think the Elks come up, and I think the Elks get this win. Break that home game curse. They get the win. Let's take Edmonton at home to beat Saskatchewan. So obviously I'm going to be taking the Elks plus the 2.5 points here as the home dog. Total in the game set at 45.5. Even though, Dave made a great point. My buddy Dave Milhouse in the CFL chat made a great point where the first few weeks of the season have been under City for the last few seasons. And it's true. God, these lines are so beatable though. They're so beatable, and they're two defenses that aren't very good, I don't think, and two offenses that have some pieces. I feel like there's going to be a lot of garbage time scoring in this game. I'm going to take the over in this one, and I actually think this total kind of flies late in the game. Over 45.5 points in Saskatchewan, Edmonton. Let's go Elks 33, Riders 30. I think this game gets to 60 points because the defenses are just that not there. But I'm going to take the Elks to finally get that home win for the first time in nearly 3 seasons. There you go, folks. Those are my picks for week 1 in the CFL in 2023. I've got the BC Lions on the road beating the Calgary Stampeders 30-20, taking plus 3.5 on the BC Lions. As far as I'm concerned, the wrong team is favored in that game. And give me the over on the 46.5. I've got the Winnipeg Blue Bombers beating the Hamilton Ticats at home 21-18. Give me the plus 4.5 on the Ticats and under the 47.5 point total. I got the Ottawa REDBLACKS on the road in Montreal, upsetting the Alouettes 26-23. Give me the plus 1.5 on the REDBLACKS and over the 45.5 point total. And in Saskatchewan, Edmonton, go Elks go. I've got Edmonton beating Saskatchewan 33-30. Give me the plus 2.5 on the Elks, over 45.5 points. Edmonton wins at home for the first time since week 18 of 2019. That's the show, ladies and gentlemen. I am so happy to be back. I'm so happy that you are back with me for another season of Canadian Football League action. There's nothing like it in the entire sport. You gotta love the CFL. Love Canadian football. It's all about it. That's it for me. Justin, Bridgewater's Finest on YouTube, Blockbuster_guy on Twitter, fueled as always by the incredible folks at Nerd Tees. And today, fueled by water so my voice doesn't die. I got a lot of content coming out in the next little while. The CFL show is going to be back here weekly on Tuesdays all the way through until the NFL season starts. Then we're going to push CFL to Wednesday and go back to doing the NFL live streams on Tuesdays. We've also got some movie awards content coming up for you in the next week or two. So happy to be back making stuff for you. So happy to see you in the comments section yet again. Let's have an incredible season and keep an eye out for that How to Play CFL Fantasy in 2023. That video will be coming up probably tomorrow. We'll see you soon.